aviation. This session also emphasized the importance of creating an enabling environment for private sector development through policy reforms, capacity building, and the promotion of entrepreneurship. CEO of the Islamic Liquidity Management Corporation, IILM, Mr. Muhammad Safri Shahul Hamid, spoke about the achievements of the IILM, adding that the Islamic Development Bank has a AAA credit rating from multiple rating agencies. More fund, however, is required to increase rating in member countries other than the 4 countries that already have it.
Can you imagine? We have so many Islamic-centric countries. We have so many Muslim-majority countries. Only 4 are rated A and above. Right? So our job is to fund sovereigns. We are to fund SOEs. We are to fund GREs. We are to fund supranationals rated A and above. And we do that. We do that frequently. In fact, next week we have one.
He also spoke about the global growth of interest in Sukuk, given the figures of the IILM and the Islamic Development Bank.
22nd of May. So we have seen close to about 28 billion Sukuk issued in the global market. In fact, this has excluded one Sukuk that was issued yesterday by Masraf Al Rayyan from Qatar. So it's about 30 billion Sukuk that was issued globally. And ILM has issued close to about 7 billion. So we have issued close to about 25% of total Sukuk issued globally. We will continue to do so, right, for the benefit of Islamic banks globally.
Other sessions and panels were held on this last day, and the press conference of the annual meetings is to be held this afternoon before the closing of the event. Essia Abkar, Radio Algeria International, the International Conference Center, Algiers.
And the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has held talks in Brussels with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Federal Republic of Germany, Johann Wedeful, on the sidelines of their participation in the proceedings of the third meeting of the Ministers of Foreign Affairs of the African Union and the European Union, according to a press release from the ministry. During the meeting, Ahmed Attaf reiterated his congratulations to his German counterpart on the occasion of his appointment as foreign minister of his country and discussed with him the various aspects of the relations of cooperation and friendship uniting Algeria and Germany in anticipation of the forthcoming bilateral deadlines. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf also held talks in Brussels with the High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Kaja Kallas. The talks provided an opportunity to review the various aspects of the cooperation and coordination relations between Algeria and the European Union with a view to reactivating the institutional mechanisms framing the Algerian-European partnership. And the Minister of State, Minister of Foreign Affairs, the National Community Abroad and African Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, has stressed in Brussels the need to establish an effective partnership between the African Union and the European Union based on the principle of African solutions to African problems, with the support of partners committed to helping the continent face the challenges of the day. Speaking at a roundtable on peace, security and governance as part of the third meeting of the AU and EU Foreign Affairs Ministers, Ahmed Attaf evoked 3 critical factors that now characterize the African landscape in terms of peace and security. The Minister of State pointed out that at no time in its contemporary history Africa has been confronted with so many hotbeds of tension, crises and simultaneous conflicts, from the Sahel to the Horn of Africa, from the Great Lakes to certain regions of North Africa. Instability is accelerating, endangering the lives of millions of people and mortgaging the future of the entire continent. He added that terrorism has become the number 1 threat to peace and security in Africa. The continent now accounts for more than half of all terrorist-related deaths in the world. The Sahel region has tragically become the epicenter of global terrorism. The Minister of State said that the AU-EU partnership would enable diplomacy to regain its central role at the heart of our collective actions to deal with the sources of tension in Africa and prevent the emergence of new conflicts. This partnership will optimally and sustainably strengthen the AU's peacekeeping process in order to deal with terrorism and other new and growing threats, while investing more in the consolidation of stability through the development, which is considered to be the surest and most effective way to achieving lasting and sustainable peace. The Minister Delegate to the Minister of National Defense, Chief of Staff of the National People's Army, General Saeed Chingri, has kicked off as part of his visit to the various military regions work and inspection visit to the 3rd military region. Masoud Sharafi has more details in this report.
The visit began at the Tindouf Southern Operational Sector, where after the welcome ceremony presided over by Major General Nasruddin Fadil, commander of the 3rd Military Region, the Army General held an orientation meeting with the region's managers and personnel. During the meeting, he gave a speech broadcast by video conference to all the units of the region, in which he stressed the importance of individual skill, discipline, and adaptability in battle, highlighting that tactical exercises are essential for testing combat readiness, improving performance, and ensuring effective use of weapon and equipment.
Individual skill, discipline, and the ability to adapt to changing battle conditions are essential qualities for achieving victory. In this context, our constant commitment to conducting tactical exercises at various levels falls into place. The exercise is a real and practical test of the training system, as it represents the foundation for graduating qualified personnel. It is also a test of the level of combat readiness, which forms the basis for gaining experience and performance quality, in addition to enhancing individuals' proficiency in handling equipment and the various weapon systems at their disposal.
The Army General stressed the need to align military development with the effort and resources mobilized to strengthen national defense and safeguard the country's sovereignty and vital interests.
From this perspective, I always insist that the level of development achieved in all aspects of the military profession across all components of our armed forces must be fully aligned with the efforts exerted and the material, human, logistical, and armament resources mobilized, as well as with the ambitions and legitimate goals that have been planned, all of which aim to acquire all the elements of military strength in defense of the nation and its citizens, and in preservation of our sacred national sovereignty, the security of our country, and its supreme interests.
The Army General listened to the concerns and suggestions of the 3rd Military Region's personnel, providing them with recommendations and guidance. He then laid the foundation stone for a 240-bed military hospital in Hassi Ammar and inaugurated a garrison circle, where he inspected the facilities and was briefed on the services available to military personnel and their families.
To the Middle East file now. The Zionist fire on a diplomatic delegation in the occupied West Bank have aroused worldwide condemnations, considering this aggression unacceptable. The head of the European diplomacy, Kaja Kayas, said in Brussels that any threat to the lives of diplomats is unacceptable, calling on the Zionist entity to investigate this incident and to hold those who are responsible to account. The details with our colleague Saad Bouazi.
Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost demanded convincing explanations from the Zionist entity after these shots that he said targeted about 20 diplomats in the occupied West Bank, including a Belgian. For its part, the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs said they were investigating on everything that happened. There was a Spaniard in the group of diplomats who is doing well. The Spanish diplomacy added that they were in contact with other countries concerned to provide a joint response to what happened. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani spoke for his part of unacceptable threats, asking the Zionist entity for immediate clarification on what happened. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Harris said he was shocked and dismayed by the reports that indicate Zionist forces fired near a group of diplomats visiting Jenin, including 2 Irish diplomats posted in Ramallah. For the German Foreign Ministry, the Zionist entity must immediately shed light on the circumstances and respect the inviolability of diplomats. The Zionist occupation soldiers present in the Jenin camp abundantly fired with live ammunition directly at the delegation while they were in the area to inquire about the conditions of the refugee camp and the siege imposed on it. During the presence of the delegation near the iron gate installed by the occupation at the entrance to the camp, the occupation forces opened fire intensively at the delegation and a group of journalists covering the visit, according to the Palestinian news agency Wafa. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry denounced a blatant and serious violation of international law, condemning in the strongest terms the heinous crimes committed by the Zionist occupation forces. Turkey also condemned the Zionist army by targeting a delegation of diplomats visiting the Jenin refugee camp in the occupied West Bank, including a member of the Turkish Consulate General in occupied Al-Quds.
And the Zionist occupation forces are carrying on their aggression on the city of Tulkarem and its camp for the 116th consecutive day, and on the 103rd day in the Noor Shams camp, amid escalating violence on the ground, massive military reinforcements and detentions. Masoud Sharfi has more.
The Zionist occupation forces set up surprise checkpoints, particularly in the city center Nablus Street and Shuika roundabout in the northern neighborhood. In the early hours of the morning, the occupation forces detained 2 young men from the city after raiding their homes, both former detainees. Meanwhile, occupation forces this morning set up a flying checkpoint around the Jabara Bridge gate at the southern entrance of Tulkarem. They stopped vehicles, searched several of them, checked the IDs of their passengers, and detained a young man whose identity has not yet been determined. At the same time, the occupation continues to impose a suffocating siege on the Tulkarem and Noor Shams refugee camps, accompanied by occasional gunfire and explosions. Meanwhile, occupation forces continue to prevent forcibly displaced families from returning to their homes or even checking on their property in the 2 camps, and are subjected to pursuit and gunfire when attempting to approach. In recent days, Noor Shams camp has witnessed a demolition campaign targeting more than 20 residential buildings in its main neighborhoods, damaging neighboring buildings. This is part of the occupation's plan to demolish 106 buildings in Tulkarem and Noor Shams camps, to open roads and alter their geographical features.
And the NGOs, Doctors Without Borders, MSF, has accused the Zionist occupation of letting in only a ridiculously insufficient aid for the needs of the territory ravaged by a genocidal aggression since October 2024. Saad Boughazi has more details in this report.
MSF affirmed that the aid authorized into Gaza is only a smokescreen, while the siege that the Zionist entity imposed on the Palestinian territory in early March continues. The NGO stressed that the current authorization of 100 trucks per day, while the situation is so critical, is quite derisory. The majority of the population of Gaza, more than 2 million people, depends almost entirely on aid entering the Palestinian territory devastated by intense bombardment and military aggression conducted since October 7, 2023. MSF also states that at least 20 medical facilities in Gaza have been damaged or put partially or completely out of service during the last week by the advance of Zionist ground operations, the intensification of airstrikes, and widespread evacuation orders. On the morning of 19th May, MSF teams reported hearing near 1 strike per minute in Khan Yunis, the NGO added in its statement, noting that one of these strikes hit the Nasser hospital compound 100 meters from the intensive care unit and hospital ward managed by MSF. This is the 3rd time in 2 months that the Nasser hospital compound is struck, once again depriving people of treatment and care. The organization also denounced the orders for large-scale evacuations issued by the Zionist occupation army, which limit the ability to provide care.
And the Islamic Development Bank's annual meetings are still held or being held for the 4th and last day at the International Conference Center here in Algiers. The meetings aim to consult on the bank's different issues and plans, notably the 10-year strategic framework for the IBDs or for the IDBs group, as well as guaranteeing more aid and funds to some member countries. Meanwhile, the private sector forum country representation or presentations would be held today as part of the IDB's annual meetings. To find out more, let's listen to this special program by our colleague and special envoy to the event, Asya Bakar. It will be followed by the Economic Magazine by my colleague Saad Boughazi. As for me, I'll meet you again tomorrow. Thank you and goodbye.
Hello Hello there and welcome on the waves of Radio Algeria International. I am so happy today to have with me here at the International Conference Center Mr. Conrad Wayne, the Secretary of the Global Flagship for Food Security. Thank you so much for accepting to be with us today.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure and an honor to finally meet in person, and really happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So this is our second interview, but the first time that we do it in person.
Yes, so it's even better than last time than to do it in person.
Of course. So the Global Flagship Initiative for Food Security was launched on Agricultural Food Systems Day 2024 during the COP16 UN Desertification Conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. A group of international partners is leading this effort to fight hunger, poverty and land degradation. What activities have been carried out so far to achieve the goals of the Global Flagship Initiative for Food Security since its launch?
Yeah, first of all, when we launched the initiative, we also already announced the funding for the first two projects. The first one is training for rainwater harvesting in Niger, and the other one is digital agriculture, providing weather forecasting for up to 7 million people in Ethiopia. Now, so it was not just a launch, we were also already very concrete in terms of, making available funding for the scaling of innovations. In the meantime, also a lot has happened, let's say, on the policy front. We had engagements with the European Commission in Brussels, with the South African G20 presidency. We had engagements at the Parliament in the United Kingdom. We had a massive engagement during the World Bank spring meetings in Washington a couple of weeks ago, where we also met with the Vice President of the European Investment Bank, the largest MDB in the world, who said, are we missing something out by not joining this flagship, because it is filling a critical gap on food security these days. Then we were also at the Nutrition for Growth Summit in Paris, as well as a workshop on food security in the Vatican a couple of weeks ago. But most importantly, last week in Bonn, we had the first stakeholder meeting of all members of the flagship, and we adopted a 5-year strategy, which is, let's say, quite broad, but also straightforward, and at the same time flexible enough, which is giving us a basic understanding of where we want to be, in the next 5 years. So this was really important, and at the same time also we have some very exciting news. While this is a global flagship initiative, we have a particular focus on Africa, and in particular the Sahel and the IGAD countries. So we are joining a partnership with IGAD, one of the 8 regional economic communities of Africa, which is actually chairing the 8 regional economic communities this year, and will even open a small office there at the headquarters in Djibouti. We are also working with the African Union and again with the G20 presidency, and the idea is, inshallah, that in September we will be at the G20 summit in Johannesburg and can show this global movement, which it is now, on SDG 2 and food security. And I believe overall there's a great momentum. Now we are staying out of politics, so we are working with anybody, but also now I think the key factor, and this is something what the European Commission highlighted also in Bonn last week, is now that we need to really show impact. So we have the first 2 projects, but now also in particular now here we are at the Islamic Development Bank annual meetings. We need really the engagement of all members of the Arab Coordination Group. I will debrief them later today on the outcomes of Bonn last week, and we need a strong commitment and really an impact on the ground, because there are millions of people that need our help.
Okay, great. So one of the main objectives of the flagship is to mobilize the private sector by attracting large-scale private sector commitments to drive sustainable climate-smart food systems. The importance of the private sector in leveling up South economies was strongly highlighted on the second day of these annual meetings. So now, how can the private sector be effectively engaged to make large-scale commitments that promote sustainable and climate-smart food systems in developing regions?
So in general, as you say, the private sector, to mobilize engagement of the private sector is a key pillar of the flagship. And first of all, I don't see this only financially. I see this also, in terms of research, in terms of their expertise on the ground. So at the moment we have, for example, two big multinationals that are members in the flagship. That's Bayer, a German company, and then PepsiCo from the United States. And we have very specific discussions on projects that we want to do with them. But again, it's not only a financial contribution, it's, we're also speaking, for example, with Nestle. Nestle is spending billions on research, and there's a lot of, valuable input I think they can provide. And then also, they work with farmers, etc. So they can bring in their expertise. To be very frank, the progress on that front has been very slow, but I'm very ambitious, and we just started 5 months ago, and in the new role, about 3 months ago, and I think the outcome also of the discussions with Bayer, PepsiCo last week in Bonn was maybe to think a bit smaller, to start with a smaller scale project, show that it is working, and this will then perhaps, attract additional multinationals. But we should not only think, in terms of the multinationals, also small and medium-sized companies that should come on board. And then, yes, indeed, yesterday private sector was a key issue to be discussed here at the ISDB meetings, and I also look forward to additional or intensified engagement of the Islamic Development Bank in this regard to help us really mobilize the private sector. Because at the end of the day, public funding is decreasing around the world, and we need to make the business case. And this also came out of our meetings in Washington. For example, we went to George Washington University, and they said, most people talk about impact, but also you need to make the business case, for the private sector to invest. And this is something they may be able to help us with the flagship, we will see. But there's also a lot of movement in this regard. But I think the key in terms of the flagship is we need to show that it is working and the private sector is taking over a project, and that also the people on the ground benefit in terms of higher salaries, etc.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Ryan, now you are about to take part in the panel themed Building a Sustainable Culture, Strategies and Ethics. This session is part of the ICD's broader sustainability and ESG awareness program, which supports the integration of sustainable practices across operations. Now, what are some of best practices to promote cross-sector collaboration to advance sustainability goals?
A couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned it already, I was in the Vatican on a workshop on food security. And one thing they presented was the Rome call for AI ethics. And this is basically something that the previous Pope Francis did. He brought together all the world religions, 120 world leaders, several CEOs in Hiroshima in Japan, to sign up on the Rome call for AI ethics. And this was really, an inspiration for me, because the endeavor is a bit similar of what we are trying to do here with the flagship, staying out of politics, and at the end focusing on the core issue, which is food security, SDG 2, for the people on the ground. And then we will see discussions are ongoing. There's a new pope now, but it is very likely that we have an involvement of the Vatican also in this flagship, and I think this would be great.
Thank you so much, Mr. Konrad Wayne, the Secretary of the Global Flagship of Food Security, for being with us today.